Folks, we have a grand guest. You remember last year we had his teammate Andy Holloway on. This year we have a grand guest. We have Jason Moore. You know him, a megastar from the fantasy community. He's a co-host of the podcast Fantasy Footballers. My co-host Gilberto loves your show, as do many others. You guys have your annual event coming up in LA. Which is definitely awesome. Your 10th anniversary MegaLAShow, which will be happening on August 24th. Jason, thank you so much for jumping on with us. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Andy spoke so highly of you guys from last year, and yeah, we'll be in LA soon for our big show at the Palace Theater, and it's going to be good times. We always have good times in LA.
First of all, Jason, I love the setup there. Newman right there, one of my favorite shows, Seinfeld. I love it. But how was it in LA last year for the event that you had a year ago?
It was really awesome. That was our first time doing, we've gone around the country doing 200, 300 seat theaters. That was the first time we just went to 1,000 seat theater and really just did it up big time. And the LA community, the crowd, it was just unbelievable energy. It was like, a rock concert for a silly fantasy football show, but I mean that's what LA is. It's entertainment.
Yeah, and that's actually a good segue for my first question here, Jason, and for Andy guess the next one. But fantasy football has obviously blown up in the last decade, two decades, whatever it is. But it just keeps changing the way you're doing it, and you're seeing these different new platforms. People, I think people are really into Sleeper now. Before it was just ESPN or Yahoo. A bunch of more platforms are going out there, but just in terms of social media and TikTok and just seeing how this is everywhere and how people consume fantasy football knowledge and advice from you guys on the Fantasy Footballers podcast, how's it been the last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, it's been awesome. We once upon a time when we started out talking about podcasting, if someone was, oh, what do you do? It's like, oh, I do a podcast. I mean, people had no idea what we were saying. We're like, well, but what do you do for work? Like, how do you, if the person was older, I'd just say I do a radio show. Now podcasting has grown, fantasy football has grown, and the NFL somehow just continues to grow. It's like every single year it's bigger. There's still headroom on the NFL, so it's been such a fun ride. And I think over the last several years, it's been more and more inclusive. We see younger kids getting more involved, the wives, the girlfriends, the women out there just loving football now. It's been really a fun kind of roller coaster that still feels like we haven't peaked. It's just still steamrolling down the hill.
Jason, and speaking of that, you're so right, though. My answer, so what do you do? And I was like, well, I cover sports. I have a podcast. Well, what is that? So you just get to go cover millionaires throwing footballs and soccer balls around and doing, and I'm like, yeah, they're like, oh, that's weird. So yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from when you say that. That next generation I think they're starting to understand what we do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you at least you guys are covering the sport. We're covering a game about the game. So we, sometimes we're 2 layers removed, and it just all gets silly sometimes.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. So what are some of the tips that you have for people to approach their fantasy draft? Do you pursue value over everything else? Zero running backs, or just kind of what is some of your advice when you come to that?
Yeah, there's a lot of different strategies that all win. You threw out zero running backs. That's a strategy for some of the higher end elite players where they won't draft a running back until the 7th, 8th, 9th round because they think running backs are going to get injured. Backup running backs come to prevalence in fantasy, but there is not one right or wrong way to draft and to play fantasy football. There are so many winning strategies. So if I were to give advice, I would simply say, go in with, we like to use tiered rankings. I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice. Instead of just a list of like, hey, I printed out this list of players, or I'm looking at the average draft price on each platform you're playing on. We like to, we have in our rankings, we tier them. So we say, basically it doesn't matter if this is the running back 6 on our rankings or the running back 12. They're not, it's not like that. It's not like this guy's 5 guys better than that. this group of players is all about the same. And so, yeah, then you try to find more value. You could say, there's a lot of guys that are about the same category right here at running back. Maybe I'll go wide receiver or vice versa. So I would say my biggest tip is tiered rankings.
And go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to ask him actually, because I feel like this year there's not like a true number one guy. Like I can't figure out between Jefferson, CMC, Tyreek Hill, but you can also fall into the trap of just trusting the ADP too much or the tiers. Like, are you kind of concerned about maybe just trust your gut and do your research, or sometimes you fall into that trap of seeing, okay, who's available? That guy's really ranked high, especially at the top, because I feel like it's a lot of wide receivers, but they're very close to each other.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of a both and. One of the things historically we found, we try to do as much research as we can, and we have fun on the show and we're entertaining, but behind the scenes, we're always in Google spreadsheets and just trying to figure out how to get an edge. And the average draft, the ADP, the average draft position of these players turns out to be a pretty good guide for fantasy success as the fantasy community has gotten smarter and smarter and more drafts are happening. Pretty much, guys in the first round are going to score more fantasy points than guys that are in the second and third and fourth and so on. Obviously, there are going to be outliers of that, like Puka Nacua from LA, who last year, was not drafted and then was like the wide receiver 5 in fantasy football. So some of it is gut. But I think if you make informed decisions based on the ADP, you can find value later. You could say, yeah, I would take this guy here, but he's usually going like 3 rounds later. So maybe I'll wait 1 or 2 more rounds and then I will still grab him because my gut says he's going to be great, but I'm not going to go over the top. And as far as the very tip top of the draft, I really think there's a big 3 to me. There's Christian McCaffrey if you want a running back, and then I've got Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb kind of in a tier by themselves.
Interesting. Go ahead, Fernando.
So obviously, like you just said, receivers are a hot commodity in the first round over running backs. Just what is with 7 out of the first 10 picks are being pass catchers to ADP. That being said, what rounds should people prioritize the running back positions?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of who you can get. And that's part of why you see so many wide receivers going in the first round. Most people's consensus boards, you're going to have Christian McCaffrey as the first running back. And then you've got another tier of 2 young studs in Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall. So, like, if you can get your hands on one of those guys the first round, great. But then there's, you go after those guys, and there are people that are going to score a ton of fantasy. I love Kyren Williams. He was awesome last year. Jahmyr Gibbs, the rookie from last year, is great. But there's just a lot more questions and like yellow flags with those guys. So that's where I think what you're seeing is more wide receivers going early. I have found this year there are actually a lot of later running backs that I like, that I think can, guys that are usually in what we refer to as a dead zone in fantasy football, where when you draft a running back in like round 6, 7, they don't usually work. They're kind of pushed up and because people need a running back. But right now, guys like James Conner and David Montgomery, older, really good running backs who scored a lot of fantasy points last year and a lot of fantasy points the year before, then should score a lot of fantasy points this year. They're available in the mid to late rounds. So I do find that in most of my drafts in the first 3 rounds, I'm taking 2 wide receivers, whereas in years past I would have been 2 running backs.
And we're going to ask you also about the middle and later rounds, Jason, but I just want to go off of that. And the one that's, because one of my drafts or my leagues, I'm picking 6, and I keep seeing Bijan Robinson, and I'm listening to you about getting wide receivers. CMC is going to be gone for sure by the time you get to number 6. What's your feeling on Bijan as a new coaching staff? It's not Arthur Smith anymore. You got Raheem Morris and Zach Robinson. He does have Kirk Cousins. Is this maybe the year maybe Bijan becomes into that 1 tier eventually with CMC?
Yeah, 100%. Bijan was like my favorite rookie last year. He was incredible. I think he got so hyped up that the Arthur Smith offense, the slow plodding Falcons, Desmond Ridder is just we're in Arizona, and so we made the trade for backup Desmond Ridder behind Kyler, and he has been so bad out here that I don't know that he makes the roster. Yeah. And so that's what the starter was last year for Bijan, and coming into his second year, you expect more volume, more workload increase, and most importantly for a running back, more success for the offense and the team. I believe they've got the highest projected win total in the division, and running backs, when they are on winning teams, they run more in the fourth quarter. They're protecting leads. They have scored touchdowns in that game. So generally speaking, there's always like one or two outliers, but when you look at the best running backs in fantasy football, they come from successful winning teams.
Speaking of that, running backs, does it make fans a little bit nervous when you have a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers who have Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren? Jaylen Warren's a guy that kind of came out of nowhere, but what do you kind of make? What do you think is going on there with like teams that have two running backs? Like we said, Jamar Gibbs, you have David Montgomery, and then the Steelers with these two. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just more and more common, right? Today's NFL pretty much has shared backfields. It's everywhere, and there are the rare exceptions where it doesn't really matter, like the David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. That is rare. That is not normal, where you can have two running backs, and if you had them both on the team, you would be like, I might start both of these guys this week, and I just get all of Detroit's running game. But that's because their offensive line is insanely good. Their offense is great. Their defense has gotten better, so they're going to be winning ball games. You're going to have enough. Most teams, like the Steelers, they don't project that way. And that's why these guys, you've got Jahmyr Gibbs is a first-round pick. James Conner, I'm sorry, Najee Harris. Najee Harris is like going in the 8th round right now. Nobody wants to touch these guys. You have Arthur Smith going over there who kind of, muddled up the offense in Atlanta last year. So you're just not excited. I would say when I look at teams with split backfields, there's really only two that are exciting to me. There's the Lions that we've been talking about and the Dolphins, because I think Devon Achane is awesome, and Raheem Mostert, last year's running back 2, who scored 20 touchdowns, is kind of left for dead. He's older, and so I see him fall into that 8th, 9th, 10th round. These are some of the running backs that are late that I don't think it's normal for you to usually be able to get a guy who is last year's running back 2, is on the same team with that projects to be awesome, is still a starter, and is left for dead in drafts.
Yeah, Fernando, I'm going to put Jason Moore on the spot here, and just in case, because if it happens, it's breaking news later today, we have the content here, and you could give the first analysis. If Brandon Ayuk goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, what would you like about that fit there in terms of fantasy football?
Well, what I would like about that fit would be what it does to George Kittle and Deebo Samuel mostly. I don't love the fit elsewhere from a fantasy perspective, right? Brandon Ayuk comes over and he kind of ruins things. I think Brandon Ayuk is better for Brandon Ayuk's value as a 49er. George Pickens is a really exciting player who, is the only guy that on that depth chart is going to get a lot of targets and is going to soak in, the target market share. That's what we look at a lot over here, is what percentage of the team's offense are they getting? That's a really valuable, sticky stat. Well, if Brandon Ayuk shows up, George Pickens tumbles down, and they both cannibalize each other on an offense that isn't as good as, say, the 49ers, where the 49ers, you've got Deebo, you've got George Kittle, but they've got a much better offense. Shanahan's run something great. Brock Purdy looks legit. So for the most part, I don't like it for fantasy across the board, except for that'll push Deebo Samuel up and George Kittle up to me.
Let's see what happens later today, Fernando.
Yeah, that's going to be definitely.
It's going to happen. It's not official yet, but I'll call it. He's going to be a Steeler.
God, you're ruining a championship contending team, and kind of, the NFC West is now wide open in my opinion if Ayuk leaves that situation. But we'll see what happens. But what's one mistake that you see people make every year during their fantasy draft?
I think one mistake is when you are looking at your onesie positions. That is the tight end or the quarterback, the positions where you only play one of those guys. What happens is there are great players near the top of the draft. Your Josh Allens, your Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, or your Travis Kelce, and the elite tight ends. But you'll get to a spot in your draft where it just didn't work out, and those 3 stud quarterbacks are gone, or the 4 and 5 quarterbacks are gone. And so now you're going, well, I need a quarterback. And so too early in your draft, you're just taking the next best quarterback or the next best tight end when the studs are gone. Don't do that. Either get one of the studs, spend up on one of the best wherever they're going in your draft, and go ahead and say, I believe Sam Laporta was awesome last year, the tight end one as a rookie, and he's going to step forward. I'm going to draft him in the third round. I'm going to spin that pick. But if you get to the tier where the absolute studs are gone, don't just go for a good player. Like at those positions, you only start one across, each normal league. So you're talking about 12 total quarterbacks. There were 40 quarterbacks last year that finished as a quarterback one on a week. And there's only 32 teams. So if you're not getting the difference makers at the position, the elite of the elites, then punt those positions and use a late 10th round pick on a quarterback. The quarterbacks that are there in the 10th round, they're going to be about the same as the quarterbacks there in the 6th. And they might even be better. Go get Jaden Daniels, who's a 10th round pick. He could have a rookie season like Kyler Murray had with Cliff Kingsbury, where he was the quarterback 7. So that's I think that's a mistake people make, is when they see a position that they don't have yet and it's like, oh no, I'm going to miss out. They take someone that they shouldn't take too high just because they need that position.
I keep telling Fernando, Jaden Daniels and the Commanders are going to have a good season. So I like that you mentioned that, Jason. But yeah, he doesn't believe me. But
I think fantasy wise is true.
Yeah,
I don't know about wins and losses.
Thank you.
All right,
he's really high on the. He's also,
it could be
also
both.
really high on the Bears. He's really high on the Bears as well. So
the Bears have.
I see the Bears helmet back there, so maybe you are too.
From an NFL perspective, not a fantasy perspective, I'd be really surprised if the Commanders turn it around and win a bunch of games this year. But the path for the Bears doing that is pretty easy and obvious. I mean, you had a good defense. You bring in weapons, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Odunze, for what projects to be, the one of those rare 101 quarterbacks. It's not like every year there's some quarterback drafted number 1, but you've got Andrew Luck and Peyton Manning and Trevor Lawrence. I don't think he's hit on what he was supposed to be, but he was supposed to be one of those. And now Caleb Williams. So if he is what he's supposed to be, yeah, turn it around year 1. I mean, we saw what CJ Stroud did for the Texans last year.
Yeah. Jason, we got a few more for you. We appreciate the insight, but maybe I could segue with the Bears there, because they got a trio of wide receivers with Keenan and DJ Moore. I'm guessing DJ Moore would be the first one from the group that you select, but then Rome Odunze, like, where do you pick them? Maybe in the middle round. So that is my question. Who are some league winners being drafted in the middle or later rounds?
Yeah, well, sticking with the trio of Bears wide receivers, I'm picking none of them. Absolutely none.
Wow. Okay.
At their draft price right now, they're exciting. Caleb Williams is coming in. It's pushed things up a little too high. There is a study we did with top 10 rookie quarterbacks anytime you've started 10 games in your rookie season, and whether or not they actually supply a good wide receiver for fantasy football. And it is very rare. And when it does happen, when that rookie quarterback supports a really solid fantasy season from a wide receiver, you're talking about Reggie Wayne, Steve Smith. You're talking about Hall of Fame caliber guys who were by themselves. And I'm not saying Keenan Allen isn't a Hall of Fame guy, but now it's you've got this split up. You've got Keenan Allen competing with DJ Moore. You've got Cole Kmet as a good pass catching tight end. So to me, I'm not going to trust a rookie quarterback. Even when they're good, they don't usually throw enough touchdowns in their rookie season. So I don't want that split 3 ways. If I'm looking at the middle rounds and guys who I think could be league winners, I would kick it off with Tank Dell. Tank Dell, last year's rookie for the Texans. I am madly in love with him. I don't think he can be stopped. In the old school NFL, Tank Dell couldn't have worked. The guy's like 2 pounds. I mean,
yeah,
you'd just get crushed. You'd get clobbered by the defense. But now you can't hardly lay hands on him. And offensive coordinators are so smart to scheme guys open and find their skill set now, where once you get Tank Dell a little bit of space, you just can't touch him. I mean, if it was flag football, you couldn't get him down. And so I do think that, I mean, we saw it last year. We saw that breakout, how good he was. And I think a cheaper version of him when it comes to an even later pick that kind of sets up similarly. You go, I don't know who the wide receiver 1 for the team is, would be Jaden Reed for the Packers. Those 2 teams, the Packers and the Texans, they both project to have awesome offenses. We just don't know who to pick. And so because you don't know who to pick, all the guys slide in the draft a little bit. You're like, well, I don't know. Stephon Diggs is there. Is he gonna be the one? Because he's, been a superstar. And over there you got Christian Watson for the Packers. And you go, I'm just not sure who to pick, so I'll let someone else pick them. But historically, those nebulous wide receiver cores, and it's true for running backs too, when there's a good offense and there's the average draft position is low for all the guys because no one knows who to pick, one of those guys ends up being very special for fantasy. So I believe the best wide receiver for the Texans is Tank Dell. I think the best wide receiver for the Packers is Jaden Reed.
Yeah, Tank Dell got shot in the leg and he still made a touchdown last week, so that's pretty cool. Tank Dell.
Yeah, exactly. You've seen the movie Draft Day?
Oh yeah. It's so maligned. Everyone hates it. I love it. Okay. Give me all the draft day. Every draft day, I got to watch it.
I actually watch it right before the Sunday before the draft. I usually check it out. But who is your Vontae Mack of this year and the 2020?
No matter what. Who's my no matter what?
Yeah, exactly.
It's Devon Achane. Devon Achane is a guy that I can't necessarily recommend to everyone. He was injured 3 times as a rookie. He's undersized for a running back. You've got other mouths to feed like Raheem Mostert in that offense, but Devon Achane is a super special talent. He is world-class speed. He is like go to the Olympics speed. He's not like other fast running backs. He is faster than the other fast running backs. You saw on a per touch basis, I believe his yards per carry last year were 7.7. And if you don't know, like if you're just a casual listener and you don't know what's good, you want to be over 4. The best of all time, like Jamal Charles, is over 5. And he finished the rookie season 7.7. Now, that's not going to stick, but it just shows the talent. And there's been a lot of, it's our job to follow this. So through the offseason, we've followed the drum beat, the workouts, and listening to Mike McDaniel talk about, like, he has become a pro. He is not satisfied with what he did last year. He's changed his body, his diet, everything. And so I think the talent he has mixed with the specific system he went to. If Devon Achane was drafted by a different team, he might never have worked out, but he went to the perfect spot with their scheme for his skill set. And I if you want to talk about a guy who's going, second, third round, who might next year be talked about in the top 3 picks, I think it could be him.
So who didn't go to their teammate? Which player did not go to their teammates? Didn't have anybody of their teammates come to their birthday party? Who is your Bo Callahan in this draft?
Well, it'll be a teammate of my Tank Dell love. It's Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs is a guy that he was an important part of the Bills leveling up and Josh Allen becoming great, but he's a little bit older. He is obviously been a locker room question mark, not necessarily terrible or awful, but obviously they let him go. They traded him away and they didn't want to pay him. And now he's at a place where he's going to get loud. He's going to get mad when the other two, I think at this stage in the career, it's better wide receivers than Nico Collins and Tank Dell are there. He could end up being a little bit of a diva there.
I can see that too, Jason, but we got one more question for you. And last year, Andy Holloway, your co-host on the Fantasy Footballers podcast, told Fernando for the question of which rookie sleepers to choose. And he went Jordan Addison of the Minnesota Vikings and Dalton Kincaid, the tight end of the Buffalo Bills. Kincaid had a kind of a slow start, but then he really took on at the end of the year. So I think that's a big win for Andy. They're getting 2. Can you give us 2 rookie sleepers to end the show here?
Yeah, if you're talking rookie sleepers, guys that aren't your Marvin Harrison Jones and Malik Neighbors, so this is a guy that he's going to drop in drafts. He's not going to be valuable at the start of the year. You can probably get him. I think by the time drafts come around, you're going to get him maybe even off the waivers. But he was also the first running back drafted in the NFL draft. It's Jonathan Brooks, rookie for the Carolina Panthers. He had an ACL injury in college. This was known. This isn't like, something unexpected. They drafted him knowing that. They're going to start him slow. I'll bet he starts on the pup. But if you're in a league that has like an IR spot where you can take an injured player and kind of just have him on a free spot and then pick someone else up, I won't leave a draft without Jonathan Brooks. Also, my favorite wide receiver, outside of those big guys. I don't know how sleeper he is, especially in Los Angeles. But I have questions for you guys following, the Chargers so closely. But Ladd McConkey, this dude, his film is unbelievable to me. I know his production wasn't great in college. They just didn't need him at Georgia. But he profiles as like that Keenan Allen type of just crisp route runner who's always going to be where you need him, when you need him, with reliable hands. If you can get open and you can catch the ball when it's put on you, and you've got Justin Herbert as your quarterback, like he was going, we have a My Guys episode coming up later this week on our show, and he was in contention for a My Guy. I believe in him that much, but then he got injured, and Justin Herbert's a job. Like I can't do that. So so give me the insight from boots on the ground there. What should I be concerned about the injuries with Ladd or Herbert?
I mean, I'll just take this one away. I'm actually right here waiting for practice to start. So I'll be in there. That's why this isn't my usual setup. I look like I'm in an interrogation room. Yeah. But yeah, exactly. But Ladd has been, the fans have coined it third and Ladd for these. That's how much they love him. Like every time. So Keenan Allen was a security blanket on third down for Herbert. And now it seems like Ladd's going to be that guy for Herbert. And they really have a connection that's really unique. And Herbert moves in the pocket. He turns and he finds Ladd. There was one where they pulled the whole offense to the right side, all the receivers, and Ladd went to the left. Herbert dumps it off to him, went up the field like 30 yards, walked into the end zone. Like they're going to have a special connection. Chase Daniel said he feels like former NFL quarterback. He's like, Ladd's going to be 100 and 1,000 guy this year, 100 catches, 1,000 yards, which it could, the way they've connected, I know they're both injured right now, but I think Ladd's going to be a big part of this offense.
Yeah, I love that my two rookie sleepers are both injured right now. Like neither one.
That's what's going to make them. That's what's going to make them better. But real quick, Jason, before we let you go, can you see us or no?
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to show you this. What is the most? Gilbert's going to kill me for this one, but what is the best? What's the best fantasy
punishment?
What is it called? Punishment you've seen. Look at this guy last night at the Rays game. I second fantasy. He's just like, wow.
Talking to women.
Yeah. I think my favorite is, and it's kind of a classic. I know a lot of leagues do this, or they do a version of this. But what you do, it's called the Waffle House failure challenge or whatever. The punishment is basically the loser of your league, the last place, has to go to a Waffle House and stay there for 24 hours. However, every waffle you eat gives you 1 hour fewer, so you get to take off. So if you can manage to eat 10 waffles, you'll only have to be there for 14 hours. Okay. And I see all the videos of people that, film this experience, and they all go in there thinking like, hey, this ain't going to be no thing. Like I'm going to plow through some waffles. I'll be out here in a couple hours. And by the end of every video, they're dying. They want to leave so bad and they can't eat anymore. It is an absolute delight. That's probably my favorite.
That's a good one. You get to eat, maybe watch a fight or two at the Waffle House. Hey, why not?
Gotta love that. That is Jason Moore of the Fantasy Footballers. Hey, guys, you guys know last year they were out here. They're coming back again, August 24th, the 10th anniversary of the MegaLAShow. You guys have to be out there. I know everybody's addicted to fantasy. Anywhere I hear now, I was on the train the other day, and everybody's like, hey, my fantasy draft is coming up. What do you think? These are the guys that give it to you. These guys are the experts, so make sure you guys check that out, the 10th anniversary. Congratulations, Jason, and thank you so much for jumping on with us. We truly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Have a blast, guys.